Scotland is wild, expansive, and beautiful. A land of breathtaking countryside and bustling cities. Full of life, and of course, full of Scots. Many of whom are wondering these days what it actually means to be Scottish.
There's always that sense of community and the cheekiness that you get from Scottish people, and I pride myself in that.
People just tell you how they feel. They don't go about it in a florid manner.
They were sort of stapled, if you like, to England, and I think it's rather difficult to get away from them.
Many Scots feel they are fundamentally different from their English neighbours and want to be governed differently as well, particularly since Brexit. Once grounded mainly in the realm of folklore, the idea of the Scottish character may now have serious political ramifications for the United Kingdom. "24-year-old Sophie Galt doesn't need a home office. Her workplace is already isolated and very well ventilated. It's in the middle of Scotland, in the heart of the Highlands, at the foot of Ben Alder. Sophie spends the whole day outdoors among the mountains, lochs, peat, and moorland.
A deer hunter, you know, the basics. They go out, they shoot the deer, and that's that. But it's not, it's really not. It's working with everything from the tiniest blade of grass right up to the clouds in the sky.
Very excited for our day.
Feeding the horses is also one of her tasks, and even unskilled workers can help out. Angus and the others are already waiting. In the summer, the working ponies carry the deer carcasses down the mountain. In winter, they need more to eat than the barren highlands can offer. The young Scotswoman says that becoming a deer hunter was the best decision she's ever made.
Being Scottish is something I'm really proud of, and being with nature and with wildlife, and the Scottish wildlife, as you can see, the stags in the distance, it makes you appreciate Scotland even more. There's always that sense of community and the cheekiness that you get from Scottish people, and I pride myself in that. We have our own little Scottish humour.
Sophie works on a private estate near Dalwhinnie in the Highlands. In non-pandemic times, it's a popular destination for hunters and holidaymakers. But Sophie sees herself as a paid environmentalist.
So over here is the restoration project.
Whether she's reforesting or restoring peat moors, she sees her job as serving nature and the land. Hunting is part of this. Winter impacts older animals in particular. Today, Sophie spots a herd that needs thinning.
There's definitely a few older hounds, a few older ladies that I would have preferred to take out. They lose a lot more condition over the winter than a younger hound would. So being proactive with that and shooting them before they get to that stage, before they're suffering, is what we pride ourselves in doing as well.
It may seem cruel to shoot the animals, but Scotland has the highest density of red deer in Europe, and they breed like rabbits. Left unchecked, Sophie explains, the population would grow so fast that the animals would overgraze the land, starve, or succumb to diseases. But these hinds are in luck today. They're too far away for Sophie to get a clear shot.
They managed to just get a bit of our wind there, got a little bit of a fright, but they know there's no threat, so they've all lain down again. We're in full view here, we're in full sight, and if we started walking towards them, they would be up and away. They wouldn't be holding back at all.
Stalking them would take until evening. Since it's not possible to shoot today, it stays quiet on Ben Alder. But this refrigerated room's contents are testimony to Sophie's hunting skills.
Don't be shy.
Sophie loves her work, caring for the animals. All she has to do is rattle the food box, and they come running down the mountain. Right at the front is Sophie's favorite, Hamish. Sophie's job may seem cut off from the world at large, but she's always thinking about the bigger picture.
I know in 10 years, the things that I'm doing in the job will affect everything from on this estate to the wider of Scotland. And that's the magic thing. And it's, I suppose, it's a bit of a legacy.
As we see again and again on our journey, it's hard not to fall in love with Scotland. And the desire to express this love is not just felt by Scots. Fishing dirt out of the water, raking up leaves, maintaining the concrete. Keith, who is English, and David, who is Scottish, have spent many a weekend doing this for the last 20 years. These mysterious mounds, which the men treat with such love, are part of the world's largest three-dimensional map of a country. It's in Peebles, in the Scottish Borders region. When Keith first discovered the map while on a walk in 1997, it was completely overgrown.
Looking down into the undergrowth, I noticed a shape, and it looked like the shape of the Mull of Galloway, which is a very conspicuous peninsula on the southwest side of the Scottish coastline. And at that point I thought, well, no, I've just got an overactive imagination. Just out of curiosity, I thought, well, it can't be. If it were, then if I walked northwest, I should find an island. And to cut a long story short, 10 minutes later, I had walked north, discovered Ben Lomond, walked across Rannoch Moor, climbed over Ben Nevis, and arrived at the north coast of Scotland, at the Cape Wrath Lighthouse Peninsula, realising that this was an astonishing relief model of the whole of Scotland.
The relief model features all the mountains and lochs of the Scottish landscape. Keith, a nuclear engineer, set out to find the creators of this patriotic work, to no avail.
It's lost in local memory. And being an engineer, this offended me because a lot of creative design effort went into producing it. Who had made it and why, and that eventually led to me discovering my colleague David Cameron.
David Cameron is a retired architect from Edinburgh.
This must be a part of the tweed, is it?
This is the tweed, yeah.
He knew that the relief was the brainchild of Jan Tomaszek, a Polish Second World War veteran who had married a Scottish woman. Tomaszek became a successful local hotelier and bought the Barony Castle Hotel in Peebles. He wanted to create a monument to express his love for his adopted country. Calling it the Great Polish Map of Scotland, he had his compatriot, Kazimierz Trafas, fly in to build it. David had met Kazimierz Trafas in the early 1990s. The Polish cartographer was quite elderly and hadn't been to Scotland for a long time. He asked David to search for his relief map.
This was all shrubbery, all tall weeds. There was a pool of water on the left here, and cartridge shells everywhere from clay pigeon shooting. And it was such a shame. And I reported back to him, and he was so sad about it. He looked, because he put all this time into it, all these trips over. And so I just made this rash promise.
David hadn't got very far with his promise until Keith stumbled upon the map. Then the two men founded a charity, Mappa Scotland, and in 2018 the relief was finally fully restored. At the time, Britain was still a member of the EU, with Scotland in the same political union as Poland. Of course, this is no longer the case.
We're heading for troubled waters here because I have supported Brexit very strongly for a long time and still do. So this is where David and I diverge. I think it's a super romantic idea that experience has shown to be totally impractical. And I think the European Union is a dysfunctional mess, showing no signs of getting its act together.
I'm not going to accuse Keith of having narrowness of mind or anything like that, but I think, shall we say, although we're on one island, I think somehow my impression is that English people are more insular, and perhaps Scots are more sort of outward looking. At least that's how I like to think of it.
More and more Scots believe that their country would be better off if it were as independent as it looks here in this pond. David is no fan of the government in London and believes in the fundamental differences between the Scottish and the English.
Where are we going?
But he sees a total detachment from England as an impossibility, if only for geological reasons.
I think it's rather interesting in a way that Scotland, in fact, is geologically part of the North American plate. And at one stage, there would have been a sea between Scotland and England. When Scotland moved on to England, England went underneath, and then volcanoes came up in a line. And so we're sort of stapled, if you like, to England. And I think it's rather difficult to get away from them.
A problem that the Shetland Islands do not have. They don't fit on the relief map at all. They're so far north of the Scottish mainland, closer to Norway than to Edinburgh. Yet Shetland is still quintessentially Scotland, with its beautiful landscape and sparse population. The sense of community here is important, and people take a great deal of pride in their small islands. But there's a lot of curiosity about the wider world, too. Shetlanders have been buoyed by their oil, which was first discovered here in the 1970s. The revenues from the oil industry have been invested wisely in the local community to build roads and public institutions. Now, with an eye on the future, Shetlanders are slowly transitioning to wind power. Yet fishing is still the major source of income in Shetland. More fish are caught here than in England, Northern Ireland, and Wales put together. Victor Lorentzen isn't catching anything at the moment. He's been stuck in the harbor for over a month. Before he can take his ship, the Radiant Star, out along the west coast, the self-employed fisherman needs a spare part from Sweden.
No, that's where the bigger rock rails is. That's what we're having the trouble with.
Oh, wow.
Half of that side is gone. It's very much a missing. I don't think it can be any more complicated. It's taken a month to get here as it is.
But it might be more expensive even.
I don't think it's pretty expensive as it is. Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't know. Hopefully not. Hopefully trades will keep going.
The majority of the fishermen all over the United Kingdom voted for Brexit. Victor isn't the only one who disapproves of European colleagues encroaching on British waters.
That's the problem there.
With their huge ships, they take more than their fair share of the catch.
Keep fishing the rights we have and tighten up on all the foreign vessels coming into the British waters. That's not a lot to ask for.
You'd be happy with that?
Yeah, yeah. You're hopefully going to get more when it all started, but the longer it goes on, the scarier you're getting, so your goalpost is always coming down.
The church bells in the proud town hall of Lerwick are still chiming like Big Ben. But now that Britain has detached itself from the EU and Scotland wants to separate from Britain, the desire for independence has spread to Shetland too. Stephen Coots and the other local councillors think that Shetland should liberate itself from both Britain and Scotland.
At the moment, it's not delivering the benefit to the local community like it should. Money is flowing out of Shetland. We want just that degree of local accountability for the decisions. We're far away from both the Westminster Parliament, Brussels as well as Holyrood. We're very far away, but these are life-impacting decisions that are made without any local political accountability.
Victor wants no more discussions about independence. It costs him €1,000 for every day he spends at sea in fuel alone. He has 2 children and doesn't want any more uncertainty about the future.
No, that's just a pipe dream. That can never happen, you see. You look at it's taken 6 years to try and negotiate together with Europe. We're taking another how many years to try and negotiate together again. That can't work. You can't have too much individuality. Like, you all need to be singing for the same hymn sheet if you're wanting to get anywhere.
Solidarity and sticking together are things Scots talk about often. But ideals and reality are not always aligned. Glasgow is certainly familiar with this. The old working-class city is a tough place. Glasgow is struggling to combat drugs, violence, and unemployment. But as Scotland's biggest city, it's also the center of design, culture, and literature. On Buchanan Street in the city center, we meet up with Janie Godley. The comedian is well known all over the country. In 2020, she won the Scots Speaker of the Year award. The 59-year-old has lived by the River Clyde all her life.
I love that the rain has made the river. This is the M8. This is where I live now, and this is where I used to live. Oh, you've got this view. You've got this view for starters. Glasgow is a port city, and it brought in so many people from all over the world. And it's got a lot of about it as well, you know. We have problems, like every city in the world. But the one thing about Glasgow is people just tell you how they feel. They don't go about it in a florid manner. You can stop at a bus stop, somebody will tell you about their kidney infection. You don't get that in Chelsea. You just don't.
Janie grew up poor, married young, and ran a pub with her husband for 15 years. When they had to give it up, she became a comedian. For many here, she has become the voice of Scotland. Funny, honest, and unpretentious. But some people cannot stand her.
They're all my boyfriends.
One reason is that she's anything but ladylike.
Scottish comedians, I think it's different when we swear, especially a female, because if you're posh and English and a female and you're swearing, it sounds like you're just being cheeky. But if you're a female and you're Scottish and you swear, it sounds like you really mean it. And that upsets people.
Like everyone else in show business, Janie's life has been hard hit by the coronavirus.
This is the biggest audience I've had since March. Hi guys, anyone from out of town? How you doing? Not one of them batted their wings to applaud me. Tough crowd, tough crowd!
But her online audience is larger than ever. Indeed, Janie's popularity has grown along with that of Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish First Minister. The coronavirus statistics are not much better in Scotland than in England, but Sturgeon's empathetic manner and factual information have won people over. Janie does a voiceover of Sturgeon's daily briefings in her own words.
The First Minister started to do these daily briefings. I decided, the message just became blah, blah, blah. And I thought, what way can I get this to be attention, you know, get attention for it? So I started to do voiceovers and say the things she really wanted to say. Like, stay in the house, we're all going to die. If you go out, I'm going to stick my toe up the crack of your ass. I became her anger translator, basically. I don't bow to peer pressure. I'm going to do what's right for the country. If I rush things through and people die, I'll not sleep wank. So see this, are you going to be doing what Boris is doing?
For months, a consistent majority of the Scots have said that Prime Minister Boris Johnson is going too far. The English politician is extremely unpopular here. Janey also hopes that Nicola Sturgeon will win the election to the Scottish Parliament in May, and that there will then be a second referendum for Scottish independence. Brexit has made a fundamental difference to the situation.
We were told back in 2014, we as in people who support independence, that if we voted independence, they would protect and keep us in Europe. And it's basically like your mum and dad saying, look, if you go to bed early, when you wake up, you will have a pony. And you go to bed, you sleep early, you wake up, and there's just a cushion in the shape of a cat instead. And it's a shitty cat. It's not even a good cat. They just lied. They lied and they lied and they lied, and that's what they did.
For Janey, Scottish independence is the only way forward. More and more Scots are dreaming of being able to vote directly on the issues that affect them.
Driven out of hearth and home, there's nothing here for me.
The coronavirus epidemic has forced folk singer Dave Gibb to stay at home and in his village. He normally tours through the country and sings. During the lockdown, he and the other inhabitants of Wanlockhead, the highest village in Scotland, altitude-wise, decided to start a revolution. For hundreds of years, Wanlockhead has belonged to an aristocratic family. Now, the community wants to buy back 15 hectares of land from the current Duke of Buccleuch.
Well, why is this his? You're talking to a history buff here. Why is all this land here his? He's the largest private landowner in the UK because he's the Duke of Buccleuch, or Chucky Buccleuch as we call him. And why? What did he do to get it? What's he done to keep it? What's he done to improve it? They've done nothing. All he does is, up until recently, like to shoot birds out the sky and get tax relief in the land he owns. You know, so they've done nothing with it. Really, certainly nothing for the community, you know.
Lincoln Richfold moved from England to Wanlockhead, Scotland, to live in a civilized, self-reliant country at last, as he puts it.
Well, you're looking at this area here, we end somewhere along that horizon line there, the land that we will be hopefully buying.
1/3 of Scottish land belongs to just a few large landowners.
It didn't have a revolution. Well, it did, but not that kind of revolution. You know, these landowners go back to the Norman conquest. So it's a long time situation, really. You know, you're not going to get me to say much about this.
Instead of chasing the feudal lord off with a pitchfork in the old-fashioned way, they want to offer him 1.6 million euros for the rugged land, the barren hills, and a few sheep. In the 18th century, when it was worth owning the village, the then Duke of Buccleuch built mines and smelting plants there. Thanks to its lead and gold reserves, Wanlockhead was dubbed God's treasure trove. Buccleuch also ran a hunting lodge here. These days, the tiny village is of little interest to the Duke. But the Wanlockhead locals love their village and their pub, which is, after all, the highest pub in Scotland. During the pandemic, people are keeping their distance. The only 2 tourists are from England. They're impressed by Dave and Lincoln's bold plan.
Is some affordable housing. We've got a decent speed of internet, and it's interesting that we've had more young people moving in. So maybe that's why. But one of the things we'd want to do is try and create some local jobs.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. I think what you're doing is amazing. Absolutely amazing.
More and more people are being told, not by choice, but they're being told to work from home. So that could be a benefit to the community, I think. So the people working here, you know, if you live in Glasgow and you're doing your job from home, then you can live here and do your job.
Wanlockhead is not alone in its endeavour. All over Scotland, local councils have now bought up some 3% of the land. The Scottish government is supporting this late land reform as best as it can. If an application is convincing, the state will finance the acquisition. As only about half of Wanlockhead's 200 inhabitants have voted to pay off the Duke, Lincoln is worried he might not get the necessary funding. But he's firmly convinced that his project is part of an overall trend.
This very different country to England, with substantially different values, Scotland's much more attuned to Europe than England is, and I'm an Englishman. That's why I live in Scotland. So it's just a natural step, really, to go from there. And here, in miniature, is the same kind of thing, isn't it?
Deer hunter Sophie thinks that independence is a question of attitude. Like most of her fellow Scots, she wanted to stay in the European Union. While a slight majority of Scots feel that Brexit is a good enough reason to separate from Britain, Sophie would rather wait.
I pride myself in calling myself Scottish first before I do British. I do still love Britain. I absolutely love Europe as well, but I can see where people are coming from with independence right now. But if there is to be another referendum, I don't think now's the time. I think we let this COVID and things and Brexit have its time, and then once we know where our feet are and what's happening, then we can make another decision.
Independence and self-determination mean different things to different people. Geography and history have brought the Scots to a point where many can picture a future outside the United Kingdom. Brexit, which only recently and only through English voters became a reality, was supposed to make Britain more independent. But what it has shown most clearly is just how different Scotland is. Something that could spell the end of the United Kingdom in its current form.